his argument is, it's quite funny because he's saying it seems to be arguing for European independence, but at the same time he seems to be arguing that they should support NATO, which is like US hegemony.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very odd. For me, John Lennon's John Lennon's mega hit Imagine was always a song popular for the wrong reasons. Imagine that the world will live as one is the best way to end in hell. He's, by the way, Žižek is famous for his radical or upside down takes, let's say, on like music and art. Like, 300 is a famous article that he wrote about the movie 300. Those who cling to pacifism in the face of the Russian attack on Ukraine remain caught in their own version of Imagine. Imagine a world in which tensions are no longer resolved through armed conflict. Europe persisted in this world of Imagine, ignoring the brutal reality outside its borders. Now it's time to awaken. Which is kind of like, okay, all right, independence, Europe is all right, whatever. The dream of a quick Ukrainian victory, the repetition of blah, blah is a slowly, it's boring. Here. There is no longer any need to read between the lines when Putin compares himself with Peter the Great. Or on the face of it, quote, on the face of it, he was at war with Sweden, taking something away from it. He was not taking away anything. He was returning. He was returning and reinforcing. That is what he was doing. Clearly, it fell to our lot to return and reinforce as well. Quote ends. More than focus on particular issues, is Russia really just returning, and to what? We should read carefully Putin's general justification of his claim. In order to claim some kind of leadership, I'm not even talking about global leadership. I mean leadership in any area, any country, any people, any ethnic group should ensure their sovereignty, because there is no in between, no intermediate state. Either a country is sovereign or it is a colony, no matter what colonies are called. The implication of these lines, as one commentator put it, is clear. There are two categories of a state: the sovereign and the conquered. In Putin's imperial view, Ukraine should fall into latter category. Okay, all right. I kind of see what you're saying about Putin's view. I agree with Putin's view, to be honest. I think he's kind of right in a way. Like, there's always a spectrum, obviously, but that's, and Ukraine, I'm sorry, but Ukraine, the sovereign and the conquered. In Putin's imperial view, Ukraine should fall into the latter category. I mean, it's not just Putin's view. America had the same view. I mean, Ukraine became an American colony. So Russians are trying to take it back. I don't understand what's the weird.
When I read this article by myself, I had a hard time following it. I'm still kind of having a hard time following and understanding what he's saying, to be honest. Another thing I would say is I'm not really into this whole thing of reading very carefully the public statements made by politicians as if
that
for sure it's true. I mean, in Iran, I know that they love doing that. They always quote what the supreme leader said. I'm like, I don't understand. That's Farsi anyway, so don't bother.
Nobody
quoting to me.
No. Supreme leader himself the next day came out and said, "What? I was drunk. I was hungover. I don't know what I said."
So this super reading in what they're saying. But based on what he said, the extension isn't necessary that Ukraine would have to be the conquered. Maybe he'll be like, no, half of Ukraine becomes part of Russia, would be sovereign with us, and the other half would be sovereign by itself. But your point is true too, that that's not how only Russia sees it. This is how probably everybody nation in the world sees it. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, let's keep on reading, but I have a really hard time following this article.
You have a hard time because he's a very confusing writer. And his writing is so confusing always. So this is not.
I mean, I rarely quite follow what he says or writes.
Anyway,
but, yeah, able to. I mean,
and as As it is no less clear from Russian official statements in the last month, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, Finland, and the Baltic states, and ultimately Europe itself, fall into the latter category. Well, as they say, you know what they call the animal that in face of a natural predator doesn't run or hide? Lunch.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry.
But that's not even true, though. I mean, I don't get it. Why does he say this? Why would Putin think that Europe falls? They're gonna conquer? I don't know.
I don't think. Yeah, you're right. I mean, France and UK are strong enough to even push back. Yeah, you're right. But I mean, you could argue in the long term, if America gives up, Europe becomes a proxy of Russia. Like it kind of like in the same way that Japan becomes a proxy of China. It's the natural, or like the natural order of things would dictate that they have more people and more land and more in this. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they'll
like,
be more powerful over them, and
yeah.
but it's not like China's gonna take over Japan and in that
exactly.
sense.
And
They'll of course influence them with their economic power, but yeah.
Yeah, and exactly, and Russia is not that strong that it can even attack Europe. Like they can't even take Ukraine. Let's not forget that. So yeah. But this is very, very long term. But this is, by the way, reflects the
But what's his overall point, though? That's what I'm saying. I don't get.
We'll get there. I think it seems to me at first it seems to indicate is.
I mean, the subheadline
for a European sort of independent thing, but then I don't know. Let me read.
But what about the subheadline? The least we owe Ukraine is full support. And to do this, we need a stronger NATO. Now, this sentence is quite clear. So this means that we have to send like weapons and strengthen NATO to fight Russians in Ukraine. That's the clearest statement I've seen so far. But yeah, let's continue reading.
All right. We now know what the call to allow Putin save his face means. It means accepting not a minor territorial compromise in Donbass, but a Putin's imperial ambition. The reason this ambition should be unconditionally rejected is that in today's global world order, in which we are all haunted by the same catastrophes we are all in between, in an intermediate state, neither a sovereign country nor a conquered one to insist on full sovereignty in face of a global warming is sheer madness, since our very survival hinges on tight global cooperation. So this is where the weirdness really begins. So he says that we have a global order, by the way, Camille. Did you know this? I didn't know this, but since the Iraq war, a lot of people were a bit suspicious on the global world order. But he says that we have a global order there, and we need to focus on the tightening of this global world order because of global warming. Don't forget climate change, and that global world order is only tightened through NATO, I guess, not through Russian imperialism for some reason. But then the next paragraph really takes us to the weird territory. But Russia doesn't simply ignore global warming. Why was it so mad at the Scandinavian countries when they expressed their intentions to join NATO? Maybe because nuclear bombs will be at its borders, maybe, but no. With global warming, what is at stake is the control of the Arctic Passage. That's why Trump wanted to buy Greenland from Denmark. Yes, Slavo, that's why Trump wanted to buy Greenland from Denmark, not because he just saw Greenland on a map and he was like, that's big, I want that. Like, it had nothing to do with that. Yeah, it was because he wanted to control the routes on the Arctic because Trump is a mastermind. Due to the explosive development of China, Japan, and South Korea, the main transport route will run north of Russia and Scandinavia. Russia's strategic plan is to profit from global warming, control the world's main transport route, plus develop Siberia and control Ukraine. In this way, Russia will dominate so much food production that it will be able to blackmail the whole world. This is the ultimate economic reality beneath Putin's imperial dream. I mean, we thought Russiagate was crazy. This is fucking, I mean, what can you say? Like, yeah, Putin is planning to use global warming to have the North Pole melt down, and then they use the North route and all that to blackmail because they
Quite
can control
long-term thinking. I mean, listen, there's a little bit of truth in there.
Putin, the guy was the guy who, the guy.
I mean, listen, there's a little bit of truth in there, which is that Russia could benefit in the near future from having more arable lands and all this, but so will other countries in the north. I don't understand why Canada wouldn't benefit from such a thing, or other places as well. And then why would all trade routes go from up there and not like the China Belt Road like initiative?
No, well, they would go from the China Belt Road, but the problem with the China Sea or the Japan Sea, whatever you want to call it, is that China has a limited access to oceans.
Yeah, no, but I mean, from Pakistan and all that, bringing all the goods there, and from there to Europe, to Africa, to North America.
I mean, look, who
is this article for? Because you have to be like, I feel like you need 3 degrees. You need like 3 degrees to follow everything he's saying.
3 degrees. 3 is the key Hegelian term here. Yeah, it's for people who wanna, like, you know, as they say in Persian, they wanna put the food in their mouth like this.
Yeah, no, like this, you need to have studied international relations and like cultural studies, both of them, in order to like understand
and climate change, like future. I mean, and it just, this is crazier than Russia. Putin, who's thugs like used to basically put a penis on a top of America's ambassador in Moscow. They're thinking like, yes, in 100 years. I mean, the country, by the way, with negative population growth we are talking about, like with the economy size of like Italy. Those who advocate less support for Ukraine and more pressure on it to negotiate, inclusive of accepting painful territorial reunifications, like war against, to repeat that Ukraine simply cannot win the war against Russia. True, but I see exactly in this the greatness of Ukrainian resistance. Again, this is like typical Hegelian shit that you turn, oh, the man is dying. Yes, I see the greatness of human experience in dying. Jesus Christ. They risk the impossible, defying pragmatic calculation, and the least we owe them is full support. And to do this, we need a stronger NATO.
I don't understand here. What is the impossible?
Russian Empire is
what is
bad.
He talking about?
American Empire is good.
But hold on for a second. They risk the impossible. What is he talking about?
Defeating Russia. He says.
But I mean, they got attacked. So once you're attacked, you usually like resist and fight back. That's like very normal. And
no, he says the critics of this say that, like, people, like everybody, like the normal people say that Ukraine can't win, so they should also negotiate.
Yeah, also negotiate. You put the word "also" in there. I like that.
Okay, yeah, you're right. I put the word "also." Maybe some of them don't say that, but they say negotiate or also negotiate, whatever. He says that no, like makes it like the fact that they're definitely going to lose against Russia make their resistance much greater because they're all martyrs, and you know what I mean, like, because they have no chance. It's like you're only brave in face of. I mean, like it's basically he's writing postcard.
I swear.
But
that's the only way it makes sense.
Yeah.
This article can be broken down into a series of postcards later on in a year. They'll put out the postcard edition of the article.
Stronger together, NATO. Woo!
Make the most out of a piece of article,
Man.
I don't know if you want to read more. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I do. And philosophers, it confirms it for me. They are not great. The US strategy to counteract through Europe is far from self-evident. Not just Ukraine, Europe itself is becoming the place of the proxy war between US and Russia. Oh, no shit, Sherlock.
Yeah.
But, yeah, which may well end up by a compromise between the two at Europe's expense. Again, no shit, Sherlock. There are only two ways for Europe to step out of this place. So see, this is now we are getting to solutions. To play the game of neutrality, a shortcut to catastrophe, or to become an autonomous agent. Just think how the situation may change if Trump wins the next US election. So he says Europe should become an autonomous agent. Okay, is that in line with supporting NATO? It seems to be. While some leftists claim that the ongoing war is in the interest of the NATO industrial military complex, which uses the need for new arms to avoid crisis and gain new profits, their true message to Ukraine is, okay, you are a victim of a brutal aggression, but do not rely on our arms, because in this way you play in the hands of industrial military
But
complex.
hold on, no, that is not just that. The other reasoning is, even if you get more weapons and if you get more help, you will always be the weaker one. So you're just prolonging the war and the suffering. That is at least the argument that I hear about not flooding, places that are in conflict.
But don't you
with
get it,
guns.
Kamir? Prolonging the conflict and the suffering is good because it leads to a more true resistance against the Russians in a way. It leads to a purer resistance against the global warming
Perhaps.
Russians who are. The disorientation caused by the Ukrainian war is producing a strange bedfellows like Henry Kissinger and Noam Chomsky, who share, while one is on the left and one is on the right, share what I like to call fucking common sense, which is Hegelians have never shared with anybody, who come from opposing ends of the political spectrum. Kissinger serving as a Secretary of State under Republican president, and Chomsky, one of the leading left-wing intellectuals in the United States, and have frequently clashed. But when it comes to Russian invasion of Ukraine, both recently advocated for Ukraine to consider a settlement that could see it dropping claim to some land to achieve a quicker peace deal. Just because that's like the only option. Just like, that's the thing with Hegelians and all continental philosophers. While at the same time, I hate the positivists and empiricists like Noam Chomsky. At the end of the line, you have to have something to talk about. You know what I mean? With Hegelians and stuff. No, let's just imagine a better world, I guess. Whatever. In short, the two stand for the same version of
Let me stop you right there.
He
has a different definition of pacifism. Someone's pacifism is like being anti-war, trying to, be peaceful. It's not like he's just trying to say anyone who doesn't want to get into any kind of confrontation or escalate any kind of confrontation is necessary a pacifist. Do you not think that he's taking the definition of this word too far?
Well, I think he argues those guys, Kissinger and Chomsky, are at the moment, or would fit in that category of pacifism that is like non-confrontational.
Yeah, I would
that's
disagree.
In short, the two stand for the same version of pacifism, which only works if we neglect the key fact that the war is not about Ukraine, but a moment of brutal attempt to change our entire geopolitical situation. So he's saying that, they argue it's pacifism because they believe that US is in charge and it's just Russia acting defensively.
I don't think Chomsky would argue that's pacifism. I don't know. The word pacifism, the way he's using it is throwing me off, but continue, please. I mean, everything about the article is throwing me off. So.
Yeah, that's true. The true target of the war is the dismantlement of the European unity. Oh, the European unity. I mean, the European unity that 2 years ago Britain just came out. Advocated not only by the US conservative and Russia, but also by the European extreme right and left. At this point in France, Mélenchon meets Le Pen. If you're not gonna stop me, I'm just gonna do.
Okay, let's move on.
I like like a scary movie.
Let's try to finish it. Oh, damn, there's still so many paragraphs.
Not really. The craziest notion floating around these days is that to counter the new polarity between US and China, which stands for excess of Western liberalism and Oriental authoritarianism. So, excess of Western liberalism and Oriental authoritarianism. We are still living in 1930s and 40s, guys. We are still haven't moved beyond fucking the writings of Edward Said and all that. We are still in an era where there is a Western liberalism and an Oriental authoritarianism, and they are divided by land and borders. Sure, buddy, sure. Europe and Russia should rejoin forces and form a third Eurasia bloc based on Christian legacy, purified of its liberal excesses. The very idea of an Eurasia third way is a form of today's fascism. These are the people who say that Europe should move away from America towards Russia, and he's saying that that's a form of Europe. That's a form of
people
fascism
say that
because, in Europe, some. I mean, they say that, but there's American NATO bases in Germany, so they can't say whatever the fuck they want. Nobody cares. So, what will happen when voters in Europe and America are faced with soaring energy costs and broader inflation driven by sanctions against Russia might lose their appetite for a war that seems to have no end, which needs that are only expanding as both sides head for a protracted stalemate? The answer is clear. At that point, the European legacy will be lost. The European legacy, come here. Oh my God, the European legacy will be lost. Where was it? Where was I? Fuck, I lied.
And Europe will be the de facto divided between American and Russian sphere of influence. In short, Europe itself will become the place of a war that seems to have no end. Okay, you had me with that first sentence. I mean, Europe will be de facto divided not only between America and China, actually, really too. In short, Europe become place of war. Doubt about that. Here you can continue. What is absolutely
unacceptable for true leftists today is not only to support Russia, but also to make a more modest, neutral claim that the left is divided between pacifists and supporters of Ukraine, and that one should treat this division as a minor fact which shouldn't affect the left's global struggle against global capitalism. When a country is occupied, it is the ruling class which is usually bribed to collaborate with the occupiers to maintain its privileged position. Then it is usually a Slavoj, but is it in this case? Is it, buddy? Is Zelensky part of the ruling class, or is he part of the opposition, buddy? I don't give a shit about what is usually. Let's talk context, right? I mean, he talks a lot. Oh, the same can go for the struggle against racism. In a state of racial tension and exploitation, the only way to effectively struggle for the working class is to focus on fighting racism. This is why an appeal to the white working class, as in today's alt-right populism, betrays class struggle. Today, one cannot be a leftist if one does not unequivocally stand behind Ukraine.
But what does stand behind Ukraine mean? That is the question. What does it mean?
What does fucking left mean? Oh, get over yourself.
No, there's so many things, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, just this. Again, this is fucking bullshit, Hegelian, idealistic talk of nonsense.
I would stop you from reading this article right now, but I'm really curious to know, does he say anything at the end that makes sense? Or like, does he have a paragraph that summarizes what his point is?
Oh, well, the kind of now is that to be a leftist who shows understanding for Russia is like to be one of those, that's the meat of the thing, and the meat of the thing is so disgustingly. Look, let me just read it. To be a leftist who shows understanding for Russia is like to be one of those leftists who, before Germany attacked the Soviet Union, took seriously Germans' anti-imperialist rhetoric directly at the UK and advocated neutrality in the war of Germany against France and the UK. So the meat of the argument is the same good old argument. If you don't support the war against Russia, you are a Nazi. That's the old trick. If the
Perhaps.
left will fail here, the game is over for it. But
What?
does this mean that the left should simply take the side of the West, inclusive of the rightist fundamentalists who also support Ukraine? In a speech in Dallas on 18 May 2020, while criticizing Russia's political system, the ex-president Bush said the result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia. The decision of one man to launch he talks about the whole,
Yeah.
yeah. He talks more nonsense. Use the Hitler analogy. Oh, he connects it to Julian Assange, which I find very weird. On the day I'm writing this, we learned from the media that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange extradition to the US has been approved by the UK Home Secretary Priti Patel. His crime, nothing other than to render public the crimes confessed by Bush's slip of the tongue. It's revealed by WikiLeaks revealed how under Bush's presidency, the US military had killed hundreds of civilians in unreported incidents during blah, 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 blah. So while putting Bush on trial is no less illusory than bringing Putin to a Hague tribunal, the minimum to be done by those who opposed Russia's invasion of Ukraine is to demand Assange's immediate release. So suddenly, after bringing in whole Iraq war through Bush and Assange, he's suddenly saying that the people who support Ukraine also should support Assange, which is like, okay, man, whatever. Like, again, this is like all
Man,
the Hegelians and all these fucking people do. Like, if you want to be morally not contradictory, you should do that. Nobody gives a shit about moral contradictions. This is not like we are not 5-year-olds, okay? We can live with contradictions, yeah? We moved beyond the fact that, oh, I'm a human and I have contradictions. Jesus fucking Christ. Sorry, go ahead. You wanted to say something?
No. I just want you to finish this last paragraph.
Ukraine claims it fights for Europe and Russia claims it fights for the rest of the world against Western unipolar hegemony. Both claims should be rejected, and here the difference between right and left enters the stage. From the rightist standpoint, Ukraine fights for European values against the non-European authoritarians. From the leftist standpoint, Ukraine fights for global freedom, inclusive of the freedom of Russians themselves. That's why the heart of every true Russian patriot beats for the Ukraine.
Okay.
So again, this is the old-fashioned American argument we've been listening to in Iran for many. If you're a true Iranian patriot, you would support America, not Iran. Oh, go fuck
Man,
yourself.
I mean, honestly, like, I don't know anything about Hegel, so I'm not going to comment too much on the Hegel stuff. But I mean, this article,
No, that's
like,
a bit
it did
bullshit.
not deserve like someone reading until the end. I mean, we wanted to do it to see if in not one point in the beginning did he clarify what this article is going to be about, just to like give you a reason to go and read all. And I really would be surprised if others stopped. This was the most like, it wasn't like the bullshit kind of Atlantic kind of article bullshit, but in its own, like, I don't know, I don't like talking about academia or intellectuals or scholars in that way, because they're not usually this wishy-washy or confusing. I mean, maybe other smarter, more knowledgeable people understood it better. Maybe they have better faith approach than me. But I mean, I never had anything against Slavoj Žižek. Not that it was my favorite, but
not to pick on
no
Hegel,
idea.
maybe,
No idea. I know that we
wait.
unpacked a bit what he's trying to say and stuff, but man, this was a lot of jibber-jabber bullshit. I wonder what others in the comment section think.
Yeah, not to pick on Hegelians for sure. I mean, Hegel may have not been like that, but Hegelian professors, a lot of them, and he's a Hegelian, I think, I think so. I'm not sure if he.
What are you doing there? What are you doing there? You fidgeting with stuff? It's making all kinds of noises.
That's good. But Hegel, but these guys are famous for their confusing writing. And even if you agree with the article, if you disagree with the article, it's definitely has confusing writing and a lot of
100%.
tricks that is trying to confuse people, in my view. And you listen to fucking Slavoj Žižek, that's his always that's one
And
of
so
his
many like
tricks.
inside
But
jokes. I feel like he was making like inside jokes or like inside like claims, you know, like
yeah,
the article should have come with, okay, first go read these 5 things. Once you have a good understanding of these 5 things, then come back to this article.
that's a good. Well, in this one, I don't feel it that much.
I haven't read his
With
other
him,
work.
yeah, I mean, look, but his main argument is that Ukraine is not fighting against a leftist, anti-hegemonic movement in America. It's fighting against the right-wing imperialism from Russia. And I think this is, by the way, in a way, it's a very good article that highlights the difference between the left in America and the left in the Europe, because left in the Europe is usually much more anti-Russian and you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they feel the threats of it's kind of like India or like in India and Arabs, they consider Turks imperialists, but in Europe and America, they're like, oh, Muslims, they're all like, oh, poor people. So it's a bit like that. So it highlights that. But his argument is basically that Russian imperialism is as bad as American imperialism. And frankly, he's wrong. It's not.
Because
Globally
of their
speaking,
because of their strength.
different. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And many other things which he does. I mean, it's a very confusing article. It's a very
Yeah.
confusing article, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you
I have
find nothing?
I have
No,
nothing to say.
no.
I said everything that I had. I mean, for me, this was a really bad article. I mean, that's my take. Very bad argument. I don't see, like, very unclear. I don't see in the Guardian. Even like people read the Guardian, I don't know, educate all kinds of degrees or whatnot. I still don't know what anybody would make of this. If anybody would make it the end. I mean, when I read it by myself, I didn't make it to the end, although it's a short article. And right now we just made it to the end to see if, if he has a good point to make. But no, it's kind of the ones that you mentioned.